My boyfriend's mom glared at me with that indignant fury only mothers seem to muster, insisting I apologize to his girlfriend. But the moment I handed her the damning messages, her expression crumbled, and I suddenly became the stranger who'd pulled the rug out from under her world. When his mom called me, her voice was an icy blade slicing through my fragile resolve. She wasn't calling for pleasantries. She demanded I apologize to his supposed girlfriend. How could this possibly be happening? Everything felt surreal, like I'd been thrust into someone else's nightmare. My heart raced, and a chill seeped into my veins. With trembling fingers, I scrolled through the messages again. What I found there was staggering. His carelessness had left a trail of deceit, so clear it burned. Betrayal washed over me like a cold tide. I couldn't let this lie continue uncontested. My resolve hardened as I stared at the digital proof glowing from my phone screen, a damning testament tucked right there. I knew I had to confront them, fearing the tempest it might unleash even as my stomach twisted with fervent apprehension. I stood there, staring at the door long after her knock echoed through my apartment. My hand trembled against its sun-bleached wood. A deep breath pulled into my chest like a tidal wave, steadying me. Opening the door was like tearing off a bandage. I braced myself for pain, knew it would come, inevitable. Her presence filled the threshold, a stern monument of judgment. She cast a glance over me, dismissive and cold as the winter wind. She didn't bother with hello, just pushed past me into the cramped living room, her movements as sharp as broken glass. Closing the door felt like sealing myself inside a ring of fire. Her eyes, the same icy blue as his, scanned my cluttered haven, the books spilling off their shelves, the laundry folded in neat, hopeful piles on the couch. Every corner seemed to shrink under her scrutiny. So she began, her voice slicing through the quiet. He said you've been awful to her. Her gaze pinned me there, with a certainty that prickled my skin. You owe her an apology. This isn't the behavior I expected from you. I felt the words hit, a sharp slap against my determination. My protest bubbled up, ready to burst free, but I caught it, swallowed it back down. I'm sorry you think that, I managed, though each word felt jagged and wrong on my tongue. But I haven't done anything to apologize for. Her eyebrow arched, unimpressed. He told me everything, she said, conviction dripping from every syllable. I trust his judgment. A cold, bitter laugh threatened to escape. Trust his judgment. I almost scoffed. Instead, I nodded, slow and deliberate, holding my ground. If you trust him, then ask yourself why he sent you here. Her breath caught, a flicker of something crossing her face, but she batted it away. Her voice was ice. It's simple. He wants you to make things right. That's all. Agreeing to something I didn't do won't make anything right. I shot back, my voice firmer now, spurred by the absurdity. I was clutching at those grains of truth, desperate, like holding sand in a fist. Her eyes narrowed. You're choosing a harder path. Apologize, and this can end, she insisted, a command more than a suggestion. My pulse thudded heavy in my ears. A surge of defiance rose, surprising even me. I can't apologize for something that isn't true, I said, softer but solid, an undercurrent of sadness. What you're asking for, it isn't fair. The room seemed smaller, air denser. She was silent, recalibrating, deciding whether to press harder or retreat. I stood under the scrutiny, knowing I was refusing her, refusing him. My apartment hummed with unspoken truths, the space between us charged with electric tension. Then I'll see you in hell, she finally spat, quick as a serpent. With a sharp turn, she left, the heaviness of her departure lingering like the echo of a closing door. As her footsteps faded down the hall, the quiet settled around me once more. I motioned for her to take a seat, pleading silently for my hands to steady, but they betrayed me with their subtle tremors. Her eyes, searching and soft, fixed on me as if trying to decode the turmoil I was barely suppressing. The couch sank as she sat, her presence a weight pressing down on the air between us. Every beat of my heart seemed to echo into the room with a vengeance, each thud hammering home the truth I was about to unleash. The phone felt like a foreign object in my hands, cold and slippery, a portal to Pandora's box. I could feel her gaze, a mixture of trust and unease, crawling over my skin as I fumbled with the lock screen. Just give me a moment, I stammered, each word clinging to my throat, reluctant to escape into the charged silence. My fingers danced clumsily over the screen, each misstep increasing the insidious beat of dread drumming inside me. Our past, rich with companionship, warmth, and unspoken promises, lingered ominously in the shadows, whispering reminders of the stake I was threatening to erode. Minutes stretched, elastic and heavy, as I navigated the labyrinth of my messages, seeking the precise thread that would untangle my web of deceit. She shifted, her curiosity masked by a patience that I knew was undeserved. My heart was a cage beast, driving against its confines as each tap of my fingers pushed us nearer to the brink. In those silent moments, I could feel the scale teetering perilously on the edge, the weight of honesty pulling against the gravitational force of consequences yet unknown. Images of her face, distorted by hurt and betrayal, flashed through my mind, each projection a testament to the love and trust one had gambled with recklessly. She leaned forward subtly, a gesture meant to close the gap, to offer herself as an anchor in the storm she sensed but didn't yet understand. Her voice broke the silence, gentle but firm. You know you can tell me anything, right? Could I? Her words were a balm and a curse. Yes, there was solace within her offer, but what would happen when the full brunt of the truth cut through it? I swallowed, tasting the bitter tang of fear. My resolve wavered, momentarily grounded by the sincerity in her eyes, but I was already too deep, too committed to turn back now. Finally, there it was, the thread I had both yearned for and dreaded. One flick, one swipe, and our reality would be splintered by the light of day. I inhaled deeply, anchoring myself against the tremors of what came next. As I met her gaze, the finality of this moment settled heavily over me. It was time to pull back the curtain. The couch felt like a bed of nails under me, each spring clawing at the tension wound in my muscles. Mom reclined opposite, her body language mirroring mine, arms locked tight across her chest, spine a rigid line of suspicion and hurt. Her eyes, icy and sharp, skimmed over the edges of the phone as if it were a bomb set to detonate. My breath hitched, catching somewhere between hope and a throatful of unvoiced screams. Here, I managed, the single word packed with more weight than my raw nerves could bear. The immediate silence pressed in, thick and suffocating. A void interrupted only by the soft shuffle of my feet against the hardwood as I shifted uneasily. She plucked the phone from my outstretched hand, hesitance marking every movement. The device tilted in her grasp, a simple square of glass but now a fulcrum on which our world teetered. An eternity passed in heartbeats as she thumbed the screen to life. Her face, an unyielding mask of skepticism, softened gradually, as if recognition seeped through her pores, slow and dreadful. Lines carved by disbelief and exhaustion stretched thin across her brow, her eyes expanding in small, terrible bursts of realization. The words she'd always doubted unfurled there in pixelated clarity. For a moment, time stilled and silence reigned, framing us in its raw skeletal structure. Her eyes widened, darting across the revelations, comprehension blooming painfully across her visage, a rose blooming on a gravestone. Each flick of her finger across the screen felt like a slap. Our shared history hung silent behind us, years of misunderstandings, each unraveling thread serving as the backdrop to this crucial tableau. I could see her fighting it, the ghost of disbelief clinging desperately to every rafter of the truth house I presented. I didn't dare move, breathe, or speak, every fiber of my being committed to watching the riddle of disbelief unravel within her. With every screenshot, every unsparing message, I saw her swallow a fragment of the story she never wanted to believe. All those whispers and shadows were true, alive, vibrant with the poison that had seeped into our lives. What? Her voice, trailing into silence again, contained the harsh scratch of her inner reckoning. She blinked, as though blinded by the exposure of something long shuttered away. Confusion peeled back from her features, replaced by a furious clarity. My heart swelled in response like an eager hound finally recognizing the path back home. But with that recognition came an upsurging wave of fear, carrying the jagged edge of truth, a dangerous ally. She let the phone fall softly onto the cushion between us, her gaze now locked onto mine. How long? The question lingered, a signpost to the wilderness we now had to navigate. Each word hung tremulously, a gate we had to swing open as we stepped towards the confrontation that loomed. Her eyes, no longer glacial, brimmed with questions and the promise of a storm yet to break, the first thunderous rumblings in the distance. The silence between us was almost physical, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to draw in a full breath. My mother stood across the room, her eyes darting between the papers frantically scattered on the coffee table and me, like a bird trapped in a room, searching for a way out but finding none. The evidence was irrefutable, spread out like a lifeless mosaic, each piece a testament to my deceit. Her hand went in her mouth, muffling the soft, "Oh," that slipped out. The trembling of her fingers was almost imperceptible, a tiny quake that seemed to be building beneath the composed surface she always wore like impenetrable armor. Now, cracks spider-webbed across it as she processed what lay before her. I didn't know. I had no idea. It was a whisper, words swallowed by disbelief, and a creeping acceptance she desperately tried to fend off. The room felt too small, too stifling, as if the walls were closing in. I could almost hear her mind racing, see the gears turning behind her eyes as she recalibrated everything she believed she understood. The air between us bristled with 1,000 unsaid things, questions she hadn't yet mustered the strength to ask, guilt she wasn't ready to admit. Is this, her voice caught, snagging on the tightness in her throat. Is this what you've been doing? Each word was a heavy step she forced herself to take toward the realization she feared would break her. I couldn't meet her gaze, not fully. I glanced down, the floor suddenly fascinating in its dull, colorless detail. The air felt charged, electricity waiting to discharge into something neither of us could predict. Why, Alex? Her voice broke my name, as if saying it splintered her resolve. Why didn't you tell me? She wasn't yelling, but each word cut into me, sharper than any shout could. Her confusion was palpable, mingled with a hurt I had only now come to recognize. I thought you'd understand, I managed, the words heavy and stumbling out of my mouth. They felt inadequate, silly, like a child's excuse instead of the unraveling truth it was. I had to look at her then, and I almost wished I hadn't because the bewilderment turning to pain knowledge in her eyes was a weight I couldn't bear. The room seemed to hold its breath, a pause so profound it echoed in the spaces between us. I stepped forward, drawn to repair the gap, but held back by the knowing that this was bigger than a simple step could bridge. She closed her eyes, drawing in a tremulous breath as if she'd forgotten how to breathe until just now. She didn't move, didn't reach out or pull away, just stood there, caught between disbelief and an acknowledgement that seemed to both root her in place and slowly turn the world she thought she knew on its head. I stared at her, my mouth open, words stuck in my throat like splinters that refused to dislodge. The quiet was suffocating, pressing us down into the couch, into the moment that wouldn't end. She looked away first, her eyes moving around the room like she was searching for an escape hatch. But there was none. Not anymore. The truth was out there, raw and naked, and we were two people left holding its weight without any clue where to set it down. The air felt thick with things unsaid, unseen. Every creak of the house, every faint rustle from outside was magnified, like the world held its breath with us. I wanted to say so many things, but each possibility seemed to knot together into a tangled mess of silence. I thought if I spoke, it would all unravel, and I couldn't bear that. Not yet. You couldn't have, I finally whispered, more to myself than to her. The words tasted bitter, and I barely recognized my own voice. I clung to a thread of denial, hoping that maybe she hadn't really known, that maybe someone had misunderstood. But even as I spoke, I felt something breaking inside me, a blind hope that couldn't survive this kind of truth. She didn't respond, just sat there, her expression a mosaic of regret and something nearing resignation. And that told me everything I didn't want to hear. Her silence was more potent than any confession. The realization sunk deeper with every heartbeat, each one echoed in the emptiness between us. I shifted uncomfortably, the fabric of the couch scratching my skin, grounding me painfully in the reality I was desperate to wish away. Her eyes flickered towards me once more, and when they met mine, it was like looking into a mirror reflecting loss and shame. Understanding passed between us, unspoken, and with it, an unwilling acceptance began to unfurl its dark tendrils in my chest. What do we do now? I murmured, the question hanging between us like a thick fog. I didn't know what I expected her to say. Maybe I just wanted her to have the answers I couldn't find. Maybe I wanted her to absolve me of this responsibility, to take the decision and its weight off my shoulders. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she breathed, a slow exhale that seemed to carry 1,000 thoughts. Finally, she looked back at me, and the raw honesty in her gaze matched the turmoil in my heart. We face it. Together, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but it was enough to crack the silence. And in that moment, as the reality we couldn't escape settled heavier than ever, a tiny spark of something, hope, maybe, flickered somewhere inside me. It wasn't starlight, but in the thick night of our shared understanding, even the smallest glimmer was enough to hold on to. Her words hung in the air like fragile glass, delicate, transparent, but breakable with the slightest misstep. I'm so sorry, truly, she managed, her voice trembling under the weight of unspoken history. She sat across from me, eyes fixated on the floor, the silence between us heavy with shared memories and unspoken grievances. Her hands rested on her lap, fingers twitching nervously, as if resisting the urge to reach out for a comfort that no longer existed. I wanted to say something, anything that might bridge this chasm between us, but the words were suffocated by a thickening lump in my throat. The living room felt smaller, as if the walls pressed in, echoing our fractured breaths and the soft ticking from the clock. Her apology seemed almost like a threadbare blanket, too fragile to bring the warmth it promised. The sofa creaked slightly as she shifted, trying to hold herself together under a gaze that refused to relent. I searched her face for signs of authenticity, something beyond mere words, something prompting my heart to thaw, if only for a moment. But there was nothing, just a mirror reflecting my own uncertainty back at me. "I'm not perfect," she continued cautiously, her voice cracking under the strain. "I know I've hurt you." She paused, breath catching in her throat, a teetering line between past actions and current regrets. Her words crawled with regret, and somewhere in their tangled syllables, I sensed a glimmer of truth. The air seemed to vibrate with the weight of things unspoken, a palpable tension that neither of us dared to breach. I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms, anchoring myself in the discomfort of this moment. My heart wavered between anger and yearning, anger for what was lost, but an aching longing for something not yet found. She glanced up, her eyes briefly meeting mine, searching for any sign of forgiveness. What echoed in her gaze was vulnerability, something I'd almost forgotten. A younger version of me might have reached across this divide, sought to mend and heal, but that seemed a lifetime ago. Still, her words stirred something within me. "I just want a chance," she whispered, a crack in her voice hinting at wounds deeper than I imagined. Her sincerity punctured the armor I'd constructed over months, flooding unguarded spaces with raw emotion. A sigh escaped my lips, quiet, almost imperceptible, but honest. In that soft exhalation lingered the seeds of a possible new beginning, tender and uncertain. I nodded, not as a promise, but as a tentative gesture towards something previously unimagined. Uncertainty clouded the path ahead, but for now, the possibility hung between us, whispered in the spaces where trust might one day grow anew. For now, we sat there, in this uncomfortable reconciliation, neither ready to fully mend nor willing to completely sever. The silence that followed wasn't empty, but a canvas, waiting, hoping, maybe even yearning for the paintbrush of our tomorrows. The door sighed open as we stepped outside, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows that seemed to stretch infinitely, like our unresolved past. Her footsteps were soft, almost hesitant, the sound melding into the melancholy rustle of leaves caught in the autumn breeze. We were walking side by side, yet the gulf between us felt vast, an invisible canyon carved by years of unspoken hurts and half-truths. Our breaths misted in the cooling air, mingling, dissolving like the remnants of anger I tried to let slip through my clenched fists. She glanced at me, a fleeting look filled with a complex blend of sorrow and something that almost resembled hope. The weight of everything unsaid pressed heavily on my chest, each heartbeat thudding against it, a rhythm of regret. We lingered by the door, the threshold looming between inside and the world outside, a place where possibilities felt both limitless and terrifyingly finite. Her eyes met mine, and in that gaze, wide, searching, I saw fragments of the person I once knew, tinged with an unfamiliar vulnerability. "Do you ever feel like words are too small?" she asked, her voice a fragile thread in the air. It was as though she plucked the thought from my own mind, a desperate wish to communicate beyond the confining walls of language. I nodded, swallowing past the lump in my throat. Every day, a breeze swept past, cold and sharp, a reminder of reality. Yet beneath the chill, there was a stirring warmth, a quiet, tender promise that maybe, just maybe, not everything was beyond repair. A million unsaid things shimmered between us, like gossamer threads catching the fading light, delicate, but present. I watched her as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, trying to summon courage from a place deep within me. "I think we need time," I said finally, my voice low, almost lost in the rustle of leaves. "But I'd like to try. To really try." Her eyes flickered, a brief spark that might have been relief or understanding or both. She took a small step closer, the space between us shrinking just a fraction. "I want that too," she replied, a whisper, but firm. In that moment, beneath the wistful shadows cast by the setting sun, something shifted between us. It wasn't the sudden rush of resolution, but rather the slow, cautious stretching of a new beginning. I knew we had miles to go, journeys through old wounds that required walking carefully, together. We stood there a while longer, shapes in the dusky glow, hoping to find clarity amidst the shadows tinged with sadness and the faint glimmer of something healing. A tentative thread of hope twined through us, pulling slightly against the dark fabric of our shared history. As we eventually turned to leave, the world felt different, not lighter, not yet, but perhaps a little less heavy. The silence wrapped around me like a heavy blanket, oppressive and thick. I sank into the stiff fabric of the couch, eyes drifting over the room that felt both familiar and alien. Everything was just where I left it, an echo of the life lived before the rupture of truth, the gentle betrayal that split my world gently but with irrevocable certainty. I sat there, bathed in the dim glow filtering through grimy windows, before I dared to lean my head back and close my eyes. Immediately, the memories surged, flooding my thoughts like an unstoppable tide. Images of laughter and whispered secrets, of shared dreams, coalesced into a muddled montage that pricked and stung. How naive I had been, believing in permanence. Friendship, trust, love, all seemed unbreakable until they shattered so easily, as though they had been crafted of spun sugar instead of the steel I fancied. Yet, in their breaking, they left behind not sugar dust but shards that now pierced my every thought. A quick glance at the corner where we always sat, where it all seemed idyllic. I could almost see two figures there, shadows of a reality now past. It hurt more to realize that I missed the illusion. Tears finally slipped free, I thought, feeling them warm against my cool cheek. They traced familiar paths, leaving tracks like well-worn rivers down to my chin. The suddenness of a sob crashed through the slow simmer of grief, breaking like a wave upon jagged rocks. Each one felt like a punch, compact, hidden violence against my ribs, demanding release even when I tried to hold them in. There was beauty in knowing, I supposed, a bitter beauty wrapped in clarity. How many times did I look into the eyes of those I trusted and not see the truth? How often did I laugh with the very people who would watch my downfall with barely concealed satisfaction? I forced myself to breathe deeply, grounding myself as the storm within me raged on. Each inhale a struggle, each exhale a hard-fought victory, slowly beginning to tether myself back to the present moment, to this stark, lonely room. The silence pulsed again, but this time, it wasn't quite as suffocating. Instead, it whispered the stalest truths, that of my own resilience. The realization crept in like a slow dawn. This wasn't the end. In fact, pain often heralds birth, never destruction. I pushed myself off the couch, shaky legs supporting a frame that felt reborn in its frailty. My own world had narrowed, it seemed, but in this introspection lay the seeds of something new, unformed, undefined, but unmistakably mine. Tomorrow would come, shaped from broken promises and laughter lost. But today, understanding nestled, unyielding, soft as the breath that comes after rain, and I breathed in deeply, letting the air fill me anew. My hand trembles slightly as I stare at the screen, the soft glow of my phone casting shadows over my tangled sheets. It's a cold, blue light that somehow feels warmer than the memory of his touch. I can't stop the rush of emotions, the anger, the hurt, the betrayal. But above it all, there's something else now, a strength I hadn't known I possessed. I can barely hear the rain that drums persistently against the window, a kind of rhythmic descent harmonizing with my heartbeat. Tonight feels different, like the universe shifted just so slightly. I wonder if he feels it too, wherever he is, wrapped in his web of deceit and secrets. I wonder if he senses the end as clearly as I do. The thought brings with it a kind of peace. I'm finally ready to cut free. Typing his name draws an electric current through my fingertips, a final connection before severance. There's an image in my mind of an old, unraveling rope, and with each letter I feel it fray a little more. My fingers hover over the screen, poised to write what I've rehearsed 1,000 times in my head, yet never dared say aloud. The rain is relentless now, a steady reminder of all the silent storms I've swallowed. I deserve better, I type, almost startled by the boldness of my own words. They're so simple, yet they carry the weight of 100 silenced thoughts. As I hit send, they dissolve into the digital void, a message destined to remain unread, yet it's enough. It's not for him, but for me. I stare at the empty thread, clean of emotions and accusations. A kind of quiet settles over me, soothing like the first breath after a harsh sob. His absence is stark, but rather than dread, I feel light, feathered by the freedom of what might be. Every unanswered call, every hollow excuse has led to this soft climax. It isn't sharp or biting, it's just released. As I place the phone gently on the bed, a warmth spreads through my chest, a quiet promise whispered by the universe. It's not about him reading the message, feeling the weight of my departure. It's about me feeling it, acknowledging it, and moving forward without the cloying residue of doubt or regret. I get up from the bed, the cool wooden floor firm under my feet as I pull open the curtains, inviting the muted light of the early morning into my room. The sky is just turning, breaking from darkness into the tentative promise of dawn. It's a new horizon, one not marred by a shadow. I breathe in deeply, the air crisp and fresh, blooming with the scents of morning rain. It feels like the beginning of something gentle and untainted. I watch the droplets on the glass catch the first hints of light, and for the first time in a long time, I smile.